This is You and the Law on AM 650. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the program. Sterling Fox along with Joe Murphy and Scott Stanley from Murphy Batista LLP in Vancouver, the law firm that specializes in insurance claims. And gentlemen, you both discussed throughout this conversation so far the sort of service work you do for your clients. You're a very client-based company, and the thrust of the energy in the company is about serving the clients and they're addressing their needs as effectively as possible. And you've really taken this attitude beyond the office out into the community. Joe, tell us some of the things that Murphy Batista does in the community beyond providing services with their clients.
Sterling, there's an organization called the Fraser Valley Disabled Riding Association, and we've been providing bursaries to families so that they can put their disabled children into the riding program. I think for the last 10 years.
It's a great program.
Yeah, it is, and amazing results. And we get the most heartwarming emails from the families explaining the difference that it's made to their child, and usually pictures. And it's wonderful to see that we're able to help these little kids have a better life.
Sure.
We're involved. We help a number of charities, Canadian charities, one of which operates in Africa, one of which operates in India. We have fundraisers at the office on an ongoing basis. And there's a variety of other things that we look at that we can do for people. The lawyers in our firm, Sterling, I believe, spend 10 to 15% of their time doing work for free. Mm-hmm. Giving legal advice, doing legal work for people who are in desperate need of that and have no money. We have recently opened a resource center near GF Strong, and if people come in from GF Strong and need a power of attorney.
So people who are going through rehab and recovering from a serious injury.
These are not clients of ours.
Right,
these might be people who have had a stroke.
Sure.
They need help. They don't have access to it, and oftentimes they don't have any money. We do powers of attorney. We use the resource center that's staffed mostly by two former clients of the firm, both who've had serious injuries, so they can identify with these people. Mm-hmm. Staffed by them, and their ambit is if someone needs help with finding housing, help them. If they need help accessing government benefits, help them. We have seminars that we carry on there. So it's really a matter of looking at what we can do to help out, from people needing a power of attorney to some little tyke who needs help to access the disabled riding program.
Scott, just kind of a sidebar further to what Joe was saying about providing legal aid to people who, well, don't have any dough and need some legal input. It's kind of an ongoing political battle in our province as to the funding of legal aid for, well, people who are not of great significant cash means. It seems that it's chronically underfunded. And in this summer of 2013, are we still there in regards to legal aid?
We still have a poorly and underfunded legal aid program in BC. And what a lot of people don't know, well, when they hire a lawyer, they notice there's an extra 7% added to each bill. Mm-hmm. And that's the PST, and it applies to lawyers' bills. It doesn't apply to most other professionals, but it applies to lawyers. And the reason we were required to charge the PST is that we were told, and the public was told, that the money would be used to support and fund legal aid. And that's never happened. The money has been turned over to the general revenue and spent on God knows what.
Right.
Fast ferries, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But it sure as heck hasn't been spent on legal aid. And so that's troubling. And lawyers have debated this. We've debated this. We don't like to charge our clients. I mean, there's some lawyers that are competing with accountants and they do the same type of work and they're at a competitive disadvantage. It's not us, but that's other firms. Mm-hmm. And the PST is just not being funneled to legal aid the way it's supposed to be.
And so then you pick up the slack when you can then, Joe, by providing legal assistance and legal seminars and just helping to fill that void that legal aid and the provincial government is simply not able to.
Yeah, yes, we do that, but I think the people who are really impacted by the legal aid underfunding are the single mothers fighting for custody, some people who've got criminal charges, and these are people who don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. That's a tragedy, is they're not people who have the ability to go to the government and say this isn't right.
And seniors, I would think, would also be in that category too,
single
right?
mothers, there's a whole variety. But the great tragedy is the government said, we're going to tax lawyers so we can fund legal aid. They tax lawyers. Our clients pay the taxes. We collect them. But the government failed on the promise to use that money for legal aid, and that's simply not fair.
Right. And of course, the shortchanged ones are the ones least able to help themselves.
Exactly.
Interesting stuff. Talk to us about, you told us about a win that you had recently, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, Scott. Give us an example, Joe and Scott, one each if you would, please. Some of the tougher cases, one of the tougher cases, and Joe, you have quite a colorful career, and so many cases you don't even put them on the web, there's so many of them, but give us the benefit of your experience and talk to us about one particularly rough ride that you had that you were happy you took.
Sterling, several years ago, I was approached by a Vanderhoof family whose 15 or 16-year-old daughter, I believe she must have been 16, was terribly injured in a train accident. A car crossing the rail tracks in Vanderhoof hit by a freight train and dragged 680 feet down the tracks before finally coming to rest, and hit the car on the driver's side. And this young girl was driving, and she suffered terrible brain injury, such that she didn't have any memory of any events that happened within weeks of the accident on either side. And I believe they approached me 2 or 3 years later. So the issue is, okay, what could we do? And the story unfolded that she was driving a car owned by her boyfriend. The boyfriend had been out driving around that day and drinking, and the police gave him a 24-hour suspension. So he put this girl, her first name was Linda, in the driver's seat, and everyone said he was telling her where to go and what to do. So she was in the driver's seat, but he was in control. And I took that case to court in front of a jury, and the jury decided at the end of the case that the boyfriend was 90% at fault for the accident, and she was 10%. That case went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said on the facts, on the evidence, it was a reasonable result. And then we went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and they said the same thing. It was a reasonable result. And that 90% gave that girl a life where she got the care she needed, because she was left terribly disabled.
And that's another thing, Scott, that we think millions and millions of dollars were won. Well, in a lot of cases, these vast amounts of money barely cover the costs of care for a person seriously and severely injured. It's a lifetime of care that those individuals require.
That's always the case. When I talk to a judge or a jury and I'm making these submissions about what the care should be, I always say, look, have you ever tried to budget for something? Budget for a holiday, budget for a renovation. You always forget things. There's always things you don't account for. And that's the case with care needs. There's never enough money because things always come up that you can't possibly contemplate today.
Anything else you can, by way of case history from the Scott Stanley file?
I think the toughest cases that I'm dealing with are little kids that have had brain injuries. They haven't had the treatment and resources right away. The evidence hasn't been gathered, and you're trying to cover a 5-year period of time to retrace what the evidence was. Those are the toughest cases. Little kids that have got brain injuries, the case hasn't been properly investigated, or the parents haven't retained counsel. Those are the hardest cases to put together.
And I suppose, there's the when these awards that you read about in the papers and the mega millions get handed down, there have been a number of years leading up to that award, Joe, in which a family, particularly, for example, a teenage girl like the one they've had to care for her with basically nothing, whatever resources they could come up with on their own, right?
Well, essentially, yes. ICBC has a coverage that everybody has. It's called Part 7 coverage, and it provides funding for treatment and rehab. But like any insurance policy, there's small print in the coverage, and it restricts or excludes a variety of things. So that coverage is available, but sometimes the ICBC adjuster, for whatever reason, cuts them off. That's fairly common. If ICBC is trying to pressure someone into settling, usually or sometimes they'll cut off funding for therapy, which puts added pressure on these people.
Absolutely.
But it's a huge hardship for a family dealing with an injured child, and that hardship is made worse by the financial problems that arise from that.
Should you, listening to this program, want to get in touch with either Scott Stanley or Joe Murphy, the website is murphybatista.com. All of the contact information, emails, and telephone numbers are all on the website, on the Contact Us. Joe, you mentioned the fine print, the exclusions, the bane of the existence of those of us who think we know what we've just signed. We have to defer that to another show, but I must tell you both, I am quite looking forward to that conversation already.
We have lots of stories.
Joe Murphy, Scott Stanley, thank you so much for coming into this edition of You and the Law. We'll see you both again soon.
Thank you, Sterling.